Hello, grade eights. I bet you weren't expecting to hear my voice, but today I am going to be giving you guys a mini lecture on the Egyptian Empire. So right now you can see the today's title and your learning objective. So please copy that into your notes. Pause it if you need more time. I'm going to be discussing two different kingdoms today, and what I would like you to do is to take notes on those topics. Don't worry, I will try to make everything as clear as possible, but remember that you can always pause or replay if you miss something. Okay, here we go. This is maybe what your notes will look like today. So you have today's date, you have the title, and you have your learning objective. We are going to be talking about the Middle Kingdom as well as the New Kingdom. You might want to organize your notes this way so you do not confuse the two kingdoms, and have the topics on the side or underlined. That is up to you. I will allow you to organize them how you may. But just make sure that you are able to separate the two categories easily so you do not confuse things with the Middle Kingdom and the New Kingdom. Okay, here's a quick timeline. You do not need to copy this into your notes. You can if you wish. We have already discussed the Nile River, and you guys have a map in your notebooks showing different places along the Nile River. When we talked about people settling along the Nile River and growing crops and starting farms, that happened around 500 BCE. The Bronze Age happened around here, actually it's probably a bit closer down here, and that was 3000 BCE. Now the last lesson we discussed the Old Kingdom. Check your notes. That happened around 2600 BCE. So we discussed things like pharaohs and the pyramids. Of course, the Great Pyramid, the largest one, was built in 2540 BCE. Now, the next two topics we're going to talk about are the Middle Kingdom and the New Kingdom. Okay, so you can sort of see the time difference here. The Old Kingdom, which we talked about last lesson, saw its decline around here. And then there was a small period of unrest right here until we have some new rulers that bring stability and begin the Middle Kingdom. And here we have the first kingdom we are going to discuss today, which is called the Middle Kingdom. Here are the three topics we are going to discuss. For each one of these, land, arts, and Hyksos people, please write 2 to 3 bullet points, but you are always welcome to write more. Please remember that you can always rewind this video or watch it. Maybe you want to watch it through first, then rewatch it and take your notes then. That is up to you. Whatever works best for you. So the first topic we're going to discuss is the land. We see during the Middle Kingdom that this empire really expands south. So remember before we were talking about the Nile, and the delta is up here, and we have a valley along here where lots of people are living and growing crops and things like that. Of course, we have our pyramids along here. Well, during the Middle Kingdom, we have these new pharaohs who have taken over. They decide that they want more land. So what they do is they send soldiers south down to Nubia. Down there, you can see it labeled on the map. Here we go. And they take over all this area. So this all becomes part of the Middle Kingdom. So not only are we going to talk about cultural expansion, things that they change in their culture, but we're talking about land right now. So they send soldiers down to capture all this land, and they decide to move the capital to a place called Thebes. You can see that star labeled on the map right there. Okay, so because they've But because they've taken more land along the Nile, they've also improved it. So now they are building more canals, and they've even built a waterway between the Nile and the Red Sea. So around that Thebes area, you are going to find, or back then, you would find a long canal that links the two. The second thing we are going to discuss are the arts. Now here, when we think about Egyptian art, what you're thinking of is art from the Middle Kingdom. And there's an example for you right on the page. So we have painters and artists and architects who are really having some fun. They're working on temples and they're covering walls and tombs as well with all these images. And we talked about hieroglyphs last lesson. You can see those present in this art. So when you think about Egyptian art, you are really thinking of the Middle Kingdom. And they depict lots of scenes of life, farming, fishing, deities. If you remember, we were talking about how deities are gods. They're depicting that in pharaohs. Okay, another thing we see during the Middle Kingdom is the architecture. And that is they're building all these beautiful temples and buildings and those giant sphinx. That's during the Middle Kingdom. Something else that emerges during the Middle Kingdom is the Valley of the Kings. Now, if you have a moment now, just Google image what the Valley of the Kings looks like, and you will find these huge pieces, buildings, and sphinxes that were built for pharaohs. And remember, the Egyptians have a strong link or belief in the afterlife, and that's all part of it too. Okay, now the third thing I would like to mention now is the decline of the Middle Kingdom. So it does have to come to an end, and that happens when a group of people called the Hyksos people, they come and invade the Middle Kingdom. Okay, so they come around this area between Nubia and Thebes. We have the Hyksos people. And if you notice in this image, you can see one of these people on a chariot. So they come and they attack the Middle Kingdom, and they're able to conquer it very quickly because they have more advanced weaponry. So they have they make use of horses, they have these chariots. You can see in this picture, it's depicting the conflict between them, and the Egyptians are easily conquered by the Hyksos people, and they sort of take over, and that ends the Middle Kingdom. So there we have our decline because the Middle Kingdom, they just weren't as good soldiers as the Hyksos people. They're just using stone weaponry. They're using a bit of metal, of course, but the Hyksos are just too strong, and they end up defeating the Middle Kingdom. And next, that brings us to the New Kingdom. The Hyksos, as we know, took over Egypt, and that ended the Middle Kingdom. Eventually, another Egyptian leader came along and took the Hyksos out. So they're out of the picture. This is about 120 years later. And then we have the New Kingdom. The first person we are going to discuss today is Hatshepsut. It's a difficult name to say. She was a ruler who came into power because she was married to someone who was the ruler. When he died, she took over. Now, she is important because she is the first female ruler in the New Kingdom. She was more interested in trade rather than conquering more land. So what she did is she sent out people across the Mediterranean Sea, if you're following my mouse, along to this area. And here you'll find lots of forest. So Hatshepsut found lots of wood and lumber there. They brought it back, and wood and lumber are really introduced into the new kingdom, right, for building things and etc., etc. She would also travel along here, along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, and collect things like beads and ivory and ebony, and all these precious materials. Now, this is important because all this trade brings in lots of wealth into the new kingdom. So this ruler, Hatshepsut, helped the new kingdom prosper because there's lots of money coming in, and the Egyptians are very happy at this time. The reason why she was the ruler after her husband died is because she had a young nephew who was too young to rule. Before he comes into the scene, however, Hatshepsut makes herself a pharaoh, and she even builds herself a beautiful building in the Valley of the Kings. So she is forever remembered for those reasons. Next, her young nephew, who is now old enough now to take over, his name is Thutmose III. He becomes a pharaoh as well. He decides, unlike his aunt, that he does want to expand the borders of Egypt. For a moment, just ignore the colors along here, the green. But if you look at this beige color, we really see the Egyptian empire expand during the New Kingdom. So if you remember in the last map, Thebes is here. Our last map probably only showed around this area. But now the New Kingdom spreads quite far south, all along the Red Sea, and it even goes up to here. There is a river called the Euphrates River, right up here in present-day Syria. So it sort of expands all along here and all down here. So Thutmose III really expands the New Kingdom. In doing so, he wants to first of all, he claims all this gold and this copper, and then he wants to build things there. So he wants to build all these beautiful temples in the area that now belong to the New Kingdom. So he commissions lots of buildings being built. And if you remember back to our last lesson, and we were discussing the how the pyramids were being built. Well, remember how long those took and how many people died building those. Well, Thutmose has to find a lot of slaves to help him build. So this is the first time where we really see slavery take off. So last year we talked about the slave trade when we were learning about American history. Well, now we see them introduced during the New Kingdom. Thutmose really brings in slavery. And again, just like in American history, the slaves don't have rights, they're forced to work, they don't get money, and it's a really terrible life. So that ends today's lesson. If you need to rewatch this video, please go ahead and do that. But what I would like you to do after you have written your notes is I want you to think of 2 really good questions that you can ask about today's lesson. Maybe you do not know the answer and you wish to, or maybe you do know the answer. It's been said in this video, but it's just a very good, tough question that might be on a test. So please come up with 2 questions for tomorrow's lesson, and we'll hear them and see if we can answer them. All right, see you tomorrow.